How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's World of Tanks console video, we are looking at the two tier 10 Russian tank destroyers with the 850 alpha damage. We're going to do a little comparison. It's following the recent buffs that both of them have received, and we're going to see if they have exchanged places. The 268 version 5 previously to this recent update with the Tanks Reforged event, which basically rebalanced 68 different tanks within World of Tanks console. We're going to see how they compare now, because the 268 version 5 was definitely the better tank. It was more versatile, it could definitely deal a lot of damage, but 268 standard version has now received a hit point buff, it's received a vision range buff, it's also received a DPM buff because the reload has gone down to such a ridiculous number. It's now 11.6 seconds reload on a tank that can deal 850 damage, making the grand total DPM of this tank about 4,500 damage per minute, which is unbelievable. It's such a fun tank to play. And of course, if you're maximizing it using those HE rounds that this tank can get, you can be dealing 1,100 damage per shot, and 90mm of penetration allows you to do that quite consistently against those Batchat 25Ts or any of the light tanks or some of the weakly armored tanks like the Leopard one and a lot of the kind of flat armor plated tanks in their weak points. So yeah, certainly a tank that I find super fun to play, and we're going to compare it to the 268 version 5. Of course, you can pick it up with the most recent challenge. However, as of the recording of this video, you have 1 day. So if you haven't already picked it up as part of it, good luck. 400 points in 1 day is going to be definitely something that you'll have to grind out for probably 10 to 15 hours. 282 points out of 400, I'm probably never going to get it done this time. However, I would like to have, because it would have given me that 9 million silver, because I already own the tank. As far as the actual setup of the tank and what the differences are between them, of course you get a hit point advantage with the 268 over the 268 version 5. You also get a kind of increase to the reload and the accuracy on the 268, because both the dispersion on the move is much better than the 268 version 5, and you also get a nice aiming time and accuracy boost over the other tank. You definitely can keep up to the top speed of the tank as well, 48 kilometers an hour, same as the 268 version 5. You also have some advantages in the form of the traverse speed. I think it's actually better on the 268. However, the one problem that you do have is that the turret traverse is not applicable. This is because the 268 does not have a turret. The version 5, however, does have a turret, and that makes the tank much more flexible in the majority of situations. Poking around a corner with a non-turreted tank becomes very complicated, and that's kind of one of the key areas that you have to be aware of when you're playing either tank, using the tank to the best of your ability to perform the best. And the armor model of the 268, however, is much, much better. The armor can be used so much more effectively. You have both the superstructure and the upper hull armor is fairly strong. It's not the weakest, and certainly mediums and light tanks will be able to bounce off you. Heavy tanks not so much if they've got high penetration guns, but if they have pretty mediocre penetration, then yes, they can bounce off you as well. Auto aims also lead to them hitting the mantlet of the tank, which is the bit surrounding the very install bit of the gun. So I don't know if we can get a little point here. That's that bit there of the tank. If they hit that, they're basically never going to pen the tank, because it's just that well armored. It's also got spaced armor behind it and in front of it, making it super hard to penetrate, and not even Jaegeru heat rounds with like 400 pen ever going to be able to go through it. The key area of the tank to avoid is basically trying to hit that gun mantlet. If you've got premium ammunition, you want to be hitting either side of that mantlet, to whichever angled is basically the instep of the tank. So if you want to pen this tank, if it's looking like this, then you want to be hitting the nearest side to you on that upper plate of the hull armor. And if you want to hit the superstructure, then you can do that on those plates as well. The tank is kind of troll, so you will actually bounce off of it every now and again if it's wiggling, which I suggest any of you 268 version 1s or the standard version players to actually do when you're playing in the tank, especially when you're on reload. If you are aiming, of course, don't wiggle because you're never going to hit if you've bloomed out your accuracy. And then we have, of course, the side of the tank, which is paper, as you'd expect, and the back of the tank is paper too, so we can't really do much about that. 268 version 5, however, has basically paper armor. So the armor model doesn't work. It has a T10 hull, which definitely doesn't work in World of Tanks. Yes, you may bounce the occasional shot. Turret armor is paper, so people will pen you through the cheeks of the turret, either side of the mantlet. And of course, the top of the tank did get a buff, so its roof is actually slightly better now. I think it's like 70 millimeters, so no longer will you be overmatched in the top of the turret. You do have that big cupola though, that horn on the top left of the turret when you're facing it. Yeah, it's definitely not something that I would ever really worry about in terms of penetrating this tank. The cheeks are what? If we look here, the strongest point, 230 millimeters of penetration. Name me a tank at tier 10 that doesn't actually have that kind of penetration. Certainly, if you're in a tank destroyer, you will be able to go through this tank basically auto-aiming it. Yeah, definitely a tank that you kind of don't really have to worry about armor too much. Now, as far as setting up the tanks, there are a few differences between them in terms of equipment that you want to be putting on. Well, the 268, you want to maximize the DPM as much as possible, so crew performance will do that, as well as the loading time, so both of them combined will make this tank much better. You don't want to be putting on advanced gun laying drive. It is pointless in any tank that isn't artillery. Advanced optics mean that you can spot opponents from further away using the view range of the tank, so that's kind of crucial. Some honourable mentions are definitely the advanced reload. That just allows you to swap between your ammunition without having to reload again. So that's really, really good for if you're wanting to fire those HE rounds, which, trust me, you want to be able to fire the HE rounds. Definitely worth it if you can get your rounds loaded for the right tank. I wouldn't necessarily use HE rounds by loading them if you don't have the advanced reload, because if a tank that has armor just suddenly comes around the corner when you've only got a HE round, it's kind of disappointing when you're splashing them for about 350 to 400 damage. Yeah, not particularly the funnest within World of Tanks. Now, compare that to the 268 version 5, well, we've basically made a slight difference. So no longer do we have ventilation, we went with camo net. That's just to stay undetected, use the kind of distance factor of the tank to be able to deal damage at distance. Yes, you can use this a little bit more to brawl with, but you don't have the armor to necessarily do that. Of course, you could do the exact same advanced reload over the camo net, or you could use improved ventilation over the camo net. That's the kind of things you want to do. As far as skills, basically all of the accuracy ones you want on these high caliber, high penetration guns to be able to deal damage consistently and not miss. Yeah, anything to improve the time at which you can just deal your damage, or anything that can basically mean that you're going to do more consistent damage in these things is something you want to have on your tank. Born leader, rapid loading of course, steady aim, snapshot for the turreted tank in the form of the 268 version 5, run and gun for the accuracy on the move. Unfortunately I don't have it on this crew because it's not set up for the 268 version 5, camo expertise, muffled shot potentially, but you could always drop that out. Sixth sense, situational awareness. I did go with track mechanic, but you can always swap that out for another perk because it's not really that essential, because if you're taking hits in this tank, you probably are playing it slightly wrong. There we go. Mark target is another essentially perk that you could get. And of course, if you do want to have the best camo, then you could put silent driving on there to reduce the effect of moving on your tank's camo factor. Because of course, if you can reduce that, then you can move more freely around the map without getting detected. So there we go. Those are kind of the key perks that you want to be considering in these tanks. Now let's get into some gameplay and show you the key differences in game of the two tanks. And here we are on Canals. This is, of course, one of the probably better maps for the 268 version 5. If we had the 268, it's potentially not as good, because you've got a bit of a city area, you've got a lot of hills, which you want to be able to use the mobility of the turret, as in terms of the flexibility, I should say, actually, rather than mobility. But there we go. Yeah, you can use the turret much better on this map, because you've got a lot of corners, a lot of corner fighting. You haven't got that many long range kind of distant shots that you can deal down like an alleyway or something. Yes, you do have that somewhat in the kind of city area which I'm approaching now, but not necessarily that good. Now the game starts off very slow in this replay. We haven't got too much going on, but what is a kind of a key factor is, you know, that situational awareness in this game. It's not necessarily the best result that we've ever had in the 268 version 5, but given the circumstances of the tank being buffed recently and me only having so much time to play, I think it's a decent result. You're certainly not going to be dealing the amount of damage we did in this game necessarily all of the time, but I won't spoil any more. We'll get into the actual gameplay now. So, setting up in this tank, you want to make sure that you are ready for the opponent before they reach you, because if you're having to move, it's kind of annoying, because the bloom, as you've seen just there, goes out so far with this tank, and I barely even moved. Like, I'm moving pretty slow. We're going like 10 kilometers an hour maximum, and the bloom is just unreal, so you can't be very accurate if you're moving all of the time, which is kind of something you have to take care of. We see that the WZ Quillin here is moving up, and it's time that I move up with him. What you don't want to do is move up too quickly in this tank, on your own especially, because if you're moving up on your own, you're leading yourself into a bit of a disadvantage, because if people YOLO you, you have a fairly long reload in this tank. You're looking at, if we just wait a second, 14-second reload with all of the DPM buffs to the tank except from ventilation. So that's quite a long reload difference between this and the 268 standard version. That's quite potentially a difference between taking a shot and not being able to deal any damage, or taking a shot and dealing damage straight back to them, and then maybe reloading and dealing more damage back to them. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things that you have to take advantage of in this tank, is making sure that you are kind of aiming before the tank reaches you. And definitely don't do what I do here in a second and try and auto-aim a Object 416, because, yeah, it goes disappointingly bad. And, of course, if we actually just aimed there, we would have got damage, and we wouldn't have had the chance of taking 320 damage, although we did actually block the damage. So it's not too much of a difference or a negative, but, yeah, we could have potentially received 320 damage there that we 100% didn't need to take. We did shut the Charioteer there down with an auto-aim. I was pretty confident with that one. We slowed down quite a bit. We weren't going that fast. So the bloom probably wasn't too much. And yeah, I'm sure one of our teammates would have pulled him out of the bag anyway. So now that we've noticed our team have basically been decimated over on the left-hand side, that's slightly annoying. Not the worst thing in the world, but yeah, certainly a game where I thought, balls, we've basically lost this one already. Time to go back, deal as much damage to the advancing opponents as possible, and bring that score back at least somewhat. Now you notice that we are down by 5 tanks. We've of course lost both artillery. They have an artillery, and the 268 version 5, trust me, does not take artillery shots well at all. We know that the Conqueror is now moving up. We're going to put one shot into him. We deal 900 damage to him, which is, it's so nice having that plus 20% RNG now. Being able to roll high for once, as opposed to just constantly low rolling like we used to get in the game. Leopard PTA doesn't realise that we're pre-aiming that corner, which you need to do in this tank, like I've said. And you can see you can dish out damage very reliably. We're up to 3,128 damage so far. We've blocked a little bit, but don't count on blocking any damage within this game. Trust me, it just doesn't happen. We shut down the T-49, who's bullying our gorilla there, trying to help him out at least to some degree. 268 version 5 there is just sat waiting for a shot on the gorilla that he doesn't manage to get, and now it's time for us to push. I still think that the Tiger 2 was still alive, which I realised as soon as I see his wreck there, that he wasn't, and now it's time to actually move up and deal some damage to the Object 268 version 5 from behind. Now what we don't realise is that the Leopard PTA is there, and what you just saw there where I couldn't get a shot on him, that is a factor of this tank that you do end up having all of the time. The gun depression on this tank is awful. I believe it's 3 degrees, so you really don't have too much work on a ridge line. It's kind of one of those really annoying positions where, yes, you can get gun depression in some places, but then sometimes it just completely doesn't work and it puts you at a significant disadvantage. And yeah, now what you see me doing here is I know that the RU, or the HWK30 even, the lower tier version of the RU, is sat over there. Do we see him move up? He could potentially have got through without us knowing. Could have potentially ran already. But what we are doing now is trying to hunt that Waffenträger E100 that is on the enemy team, still left alive. We have no idea how many hit points he's on, which could potentially be horrible if we meet him one-on-one in combat. we are basically hoping that he's not going to be just sat around here on more than one shot of damage, to the point where he's just going to clip us for all of the health on this tank, because yes, we're not going to bounce any, and he's certainly probably not going to miss with the accuracy that that tank gets. Now, I'm going to poke this corner. We're going to try and spot the opponents for our team if we can, possibly, because we have decent view range. It's not awful. We're probably not going to be able to outspot the light tank, but if we do get spotted, it gives us an indication as to where the light tank has gone, and that's always key. Remember that in the game. If you get spotted, use that to your knowledge. If you get spotted and you've poked around a corner just like there, if we did get spotted theoretically, that would mean that the light tank or the tank destroyer or the artillery is sat in an area right in front of us. It's probably not the artillery, because he's probably not going to have better view range than us. And yeah, that's kind of what you have to think about. I'm probably thinking that if I got spotted there, it would be the light tank, because he was there reasonably early. And yeah, you have to kind of think about those things. Now, we loaded a HE round there, and that is something that you need to do in the 268 version 5 if you want to maximise your damage. Now, you realise that the reason why I loaded HE is because what 3 tanks are left alive? It's a Waffenträger Alfie 100, 0 armour on the turret. We've got an HWK-30, which definitely doesn't have 90mm of effective armour pretty much anywhere on his tank unless we hit the tracks, and the T92 HMC, who definitely doesn't have any armour. And talking about the T92 HMC, it's goodbye, good night, T92. Always love taking out an artillery in a tank like this, one that gets bullied by artillery all of the time, and this tank definitely does. That's kind of one thing that I don't like about the 268 version 5, and something that I find a little bit tedious when you're coming up against a lot of maybe multiple artillery in a team, or in a platoon. That's even worse, and yeah, being splashed for 900 damage is not fun at all. Now, the Waffle has taken out the Draugen on our team, so that means that he shot one of his shots. And of course, if he's got the 15cm, that means he can no longer deal damage to us, or he can't deal consistent damage to us. We take one hit, he's fired all of his rounds with the 15cm, meaning that he is completely out of the game now. He can't do anything to us, and although we didn't actually pen, we still dealt 550 damage to the Waffle. I'm really actually surprised that we didn't pen his turret there. Must have hit the gun or something like that, meaning that we don't get the fully penetrating shot with HE dealing 1100 damage, which is actually disappointing. Now, we're going to move forward to support our team, try and avoid them getting taken out by any pesky light tank that could be around hiding in the back. Now, what we don't notice straight away is the light tank is right there. However, we do catch on pretty quick. It's now time to go after the HWK-30. What we do now is try and cut him off by stopping in a second to be able to deal that damaging shot, if we can, on the clearing point that we will see in just a second. But unfortunately, the gun depression messes us up again. Now, here's something to note in all of your battles when he's chasing a light tank. Well, what 2 ways can he go? Well, he can either come straight towards us, or he can go straight away from us. What I decide is that the heavy tank on my team behind me can cover us if he comes towards us, and so I'm going to go on the advantage. We're going to push towards E1, where he will probably be crossing at that point, to be able to cut off, intersect him, and then be able to deal with him however we shall find. We've got to make sure that we do aim fully, or at least try and aim fully, to be able to take him out. Now, does this pay off for me? Well, we're about to find out. Yes, it does. He is here. We're going to aim. Building's coming up. Might as well shoot. He's probably not going to be able to turn around before that we reload. And we pick him up for the final damaging hit of the game. And we pick up 5,900 damage, which, as I said in the start of this video, wasn't the awful damage. 5,980 damage, 174 assist is certainly nothing really to talk about. 4 damage enemies destroyed, and we also picked up a little bit towards our Marks of Excellence first class badge, and it certainly wasn't the worst game I've ever had in the 268 version 5. Now I think it's time to do a little comparison with the 268. Now, the 268, we are here on Fisherman's Bay, of course. We're going to be trying to get the victory on this one. We're going to move towards the opponents as quickly as possible, set ourselves up to be able to outspot anyone that decides that they're going to try and bully us or attack us from the left-hand side of the map, which is, of course, somewhere you want to be taking a tank destroyer. But what I see a lot of heavy tanks doing is coming back here too. That is an absolute no-no. A lot of medium tanks coming back here too. That is an absolute no-no. You do not come back here unless you're a tank destroyer, or if you're a medium that is trying to support this flank and push down into E1 at the start of the game. Don't be sitting back here trying to snipe from the back in your medium tank. It is not how you play a medium tank. It's certainly not how you win the games, and I see a lot of players doing that, thinking that they're going to have good results from sniping. But if you don't have any vision in the form of the light tanks or the mediums pushing forward, you're not going to be able to detect anything, and then you're not going to be able to deal any damage. So what's the point of camping if you're not going to be able to spot anyone? But anyway, aside from that, where have we set up in the 268? This is my key position on a map on Fisherman's Bay. This is such a nice position at the start of the game to get early shots on any light tanks that are moving into the position in what, E3 and F3, you know, the big open field, that we can be able to get some damage on them, so we can help our light tanks to avoid getting YOLO'd by them, and hopefully that will mean that we can spot late game and try and get the victory. Whether that happens or not, well, you'll have to wait and see. But what you see me doing here is lining up the shot on the map border to be able to try and blind fire that tank destroyer, whoever it was, at the end. Now, T100 LT, we're seeing him YOLOing our light tank, which is exactly what I did say about, and we managed to pick up the damaging hit on the AMX 13105. You'll see how quickly we're reloading, especially with enhanced combat rations, because not only does that boost up your accuracy during that time, it also boosts up the aim time, it boosts up pretty much everything in your tank. One problem with the 268, however, that you've just seen there, is the shell velocity. The shell velocity on the 268 is awful, absolutely awful. You have to lead your shots so well to be able to consistently deal damage from long range. And yes, trust me, the heat rounds of this tank are faster. Of course they are, you know, typical. Now what you see me doing here is hitting the Ragnarok, 908 damage to him. Nice roll there. We have no complaints with that. And then, of course, what we're doing now is we do see some rounds coming in from the windmill, and we were just trying to blind fire anyone that could potentially be there. Now we're going to try and cover anyone that's pushing these tanks, and this is why I like this position. You can try and cover your team if they get YOLO'd, and I love covering people that, you know, when they're getting YOLO'd, you can just punish those YOLO wagons in the game, and so you can get some damage on them, and it feels so rewarding when someone thought, oh yeah, I'm just going to go in and take out this guy, and then they get memed on by a massive 850 alpha damage gun that reloads in 11 seconds, unless you've got combat rations, in which case it reloads in 11.1 seconds. Oh my god, it's utterly ridiculous. T-34-2 there gets taken out by me once again. Nice shot into him. We've picked up 2,000 damage already, which is nice. Not particularly the worst game ever. You're not going to be particularly thrilled with that. That's only, what, 3 penetrating shots in a game at tier 10? Yeah, it's pretty average. What we do now here, however, is we're just waiting to try and get a shot on someone. We try and go after the 215B, but we only track him, which is really annoying. Shouldn't have loaded the heat round. We should have gone with our AP round to be able to consistently deal damage to him. Now, CS63, he is getting YOLO'd pretty hard. What we do, pick up the CS53. We love that. We absolutely love it. It looks like the FV215B183 decided he was going to push out that guy because, yeah, he's toxic. But then we pick up the Waffenträger Aufpanzerfear as well, which is always fun. I love it when they all just come one by one and you can just pick up damaging hits left, right and centre. Now we're going to go for the T100 LT. We didn't manage to hit him blind, which is unfortunate, and now it's time to start thinking about the right hand side of the map because we have lost that side as well. It's time to get into a position to be able to deal damage to them as they're advancing, or alternatively protect the left hand flank for anyone that's going to advance in terms of that Death Star, because we need to get him out of the game, because if we take a hit from that, that is a massive old slug of hit points disappearing from the tank, and yeah, that's not something you want at the early game. 2,757 damage isn't awful. You can use this position here, which is covered with bushes. It's a really good defensible spot if they're deciding to YOLO down this flank, which, trust me, they do from time to time. It's not necessarily a guarantee, but it certainly is something that people will do for some reason. Yeah, I wouldn't ever really push if people are in this position that me and the ISU are in here. At least I think that's an ISU from what I can visually see. Yeah, it is. Now, we're 5 minutes into the game. We've only picked up 2,700 damage. We've not been using the DPM of the tank particularly too well, but, you know, we'll take it. We'll try and deal with a bit of damage, but we bounce off of the M48A2. How? We've got 390 pen with our heat round. I was very surprised by that, considering, you know, how much damage we've actually got. Barask is now advancing on the left-hand side, and it's looking like we are going to lose this game pretty hard unless I pull out something out of the bag, which is unlikely when we've got so many full health tanks or pretty healthy tanks within the game. We put one into the M48A2, who's now trying to get that final shot on the 268 version 5, our like kind of lower alpha damage kind of version with more armor. We put one more into the M48, who was the guy kind of pestering the 268 version 5. We've also got the Ragnarok, who's now advancing, and we need to get him out of the game if we possibly can, and unfortunately we don't manage to. Can we feather a shot? Can we? Can we? No. Oh, uh-oh. This is not looking good. We've got a Barras now on our left-hand side attacking the T-44-100. We've also got the, of course, Death Star that was still over on the right-hand side. We've got an AMX AC-48, and it's now 1 versus 5 in a scenario where, yes, I've got hit points, but I haven't got that many hit points, and unfortunately, the Ragnarok did get here before I was able to actually do what I needed to do. He bounces, which is nice, and we put one round into him. Yes, secured that one. Now it's time to think about the people that are going to be coming from behind that Barask and also the AMX AC-48. We see a tree has gone down on the right-hand side, which we know will be a tank coming that way, as well as whatever it is behind us. Now the now the medium does come, the Barask here. He wasn't an awful player, but I don't know why he came down like that. But we also have the AC coming now. What we do is we try and back up into the map border to be able to try and avoid him from being able to turn. Unfortunately, we go forward and the AC is firing a PCR, which means that we are not bouncing any of his rounds right here. And unfortunately, we do get taken out in the game. However, what I thought was the opportunities that we had in the 268, the accuracy. This is all after the most recent updates and buffs, so we do have the accuracy nerf overall in World of Tanks console, so no longer is it as accurate. And we tried to carry the game, picked up 7 enemies destroyed. We get in that Devastator medal, 5,651 damage, and there wasn't too much I could do when all of them pretty much came at the same time at the end of the battle. There we go, 680 damage blocked, 12 direct hits, and a fantastic game, at least from my point of view. You know, it was fun, it was interesting, and I potentially had the way to get the win, but we didn't manage to do it. But yeah, there we go. Those are the 2 tanks, the Object 268 and the version 5. Yeah, both great tanks within today's current meta. I would say that the shift in meta has changed. It is now down to the 268 in terms of being the better tank, in my personal opinion. You have the armor, you have the gun stats, you have the mobility seems better. You also have the accuracy, which is a massive thing. You definitely have much better accuracy. And of course you have the DPM advantage, meaning that you can just deal incredible amounts of damage in such little time in this tank. Definitely the one I'd go for out of the 2. But of course, the Object 268 version 5 was a free tank that everyone can play, and we have no complaints with that. Of course, let me know in the comment section down below which one you would choose out of the 2, and we can get a discussion going. Thanks very much for watching. If you want to check out a video on the most recent buffs to the FV215B, which, trust me, that tank is absolutely fantastic in-game now. Yeah, you can do that on screen right now. Other than that, thanks very much to the channel members and, of course, you for watching this video. Hope you join me for the next one, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.